Imagine you stand on a slick Venetian quay in AD 1202, boots skidding on fish scales and harbor slime. You clutch a leather strap that smells of old sweat and incense because it holds the only things you own: a knife, a crust of bread, a wooden cross that bites your palm when you squeeze too hard. You come here to chase salvation, but you stare at numbers you cannot read and a debt you can feel like a hand around your throat. You see ships taller than houses, their ribs tar black, their ropes creaking like restless beasts. You feel hope try to rise in your chest, but it meets the hard wall of Venetian silence. Therefore your crusade begins not with a prayer, but with a bill. You see them, Venetian merchants in clean wool and calm faces, as if war is only another cargo. No shouting, no pleading, just a smile that shows nothing. A captain's finger taps parchment with the sharp patience of a judge. The tapping becomes the loudest sound on the dock. You feel men around you shifting, the way animals shift when a trap closes. The contract is supposed to carry an army to Jerusalem, to the holy city, to a place your priest describes with tears. But the ink on this page demands more coin than your entire host can pour onto the table. You hear someone whisper that the ships are ready. You hear someone else whisper that the payment is not. You see the Doge, Enrico Dandolo, carried forward like a relic on display. His eyes look cloudy, blind, but the old man's face stays sharp as a knife's edge. You feel the crowd tighten when he speaks, because his voice does not beg. It bargains. It promises. It threatens without ever saying the word. The Venetians do not need your holiness. They need your labor, pay, or work. You feel the pivot happen inside your stomach, like a stone dropping into deep water. The crusade stops being a mission. Therefore it becomes leverage. You hear the offer. A city called Zara. You hear the word Christian, and it lands in you like cold iron. Zara belongs to a Christian king. Zara prays to the same Christ. But Zara also stands against Venetian prophet. Therefore Venice turns your vow into a weapon pointed at a baptized throat. You see comrades argue with red faces, some shouting about sin, some shouting about survival. A priest raises a hand, but hunger raises a louder fist. You feel your own mouth go dry, because a vow does not fill a belly. The bread in your pouch is already hard enough to break a tooth. You see the ship's gangways open. You feel the shove of bodies. You smell pitch and salt. You step onto planks wet with spray, and your boots find no holiness there, only work. The oars bite the sea like rows of teeth. The sails fill, white and swollen. But the first pivot happens without a battle, just a decision made under financial pressure. Therefore your road to Jerusalem bends toward a Christian city you are about to bleed. Imagine the approach to Zara. You see walls rise ahead, solid stone that should be friendly, because crosses glitter on towers. But the sea carries you anyway. Therefore your stomach knots with a shame that tastes metallic, like blood you have not spilled yet. You feel the ladder's weight on your shoulder, the wood slick with tar. You hear a bolt thud into a shield beside you. The sound is not different because the man behind the wall is baptized. The sound is the same as any war sound, a promise of pain. You run. You slip. You cut yourself on a rope that burns your palm. You see men climb ladders and vanish over parapets, swallowed by the wall's mouth. You don't know if they land on stone or on spears. Therefore you climb faster, because stopping makes you think. You feel your arms shake, not from fear alone, but from the knowledge that your hands do the devil's accounting for someone else's ledger. You hear the city scream like any other city. You smell smoke. You taste grit. You reach the top. You see a defender, wide-eyed, bearded, the face of a neighbor you could have shared bread with. He swings. You lift your shield. The impact jolts through your bones. You feel the world narrow to breath and balance. But your side keeps coming wave after wave, because the debt does not allow mercy. Therefore Zara falls beneath boots that should have knelt in prayer. When the fighting slows, the silence is worse. You see doors smashed. You see hands raised. You see priests in the street with tight mouths, their eyes refusing yours. You feel the stain settle on your skin like soot that never washes off. Word spreads through camp like sickness, excommunication. The Pope condemns this attack. You hear it pass from mouth to mouth, half rumor, half verdict. Some men spit and curse. Some men go pale. But no one can unspill what spills. You sit near a fire that smells of wet wood. You chew ration meat that tastes like rope. You feel the cold in your fingers, because winter finds every crack in your gloves. You watch allies avoid eye contact, as if looking at you risks infection. Therefore you become a crusader with a mark that no badge can cover. But a crusade is a moving hunger, and hunger attracts offers. Imagine a young man stepping into the camp with silk at his sleeves and desperation in his posture. You hear his name whispered, Alexios, a Byzantine prince. His eyes flick from faces to weapons, counting. You see the way Venetian captains straighten, because gold is a language they speak without translation. The prince promises the impossible: money enough to pay Venice, supplies enough to feed the host, soldiers enough to swell the ranks, and a miracle: union between churches that glare at each other across centuries. Therefore the offer gleams like a clean doorway out of sin. You feel men around you inhale as if a feast appears. You smell it already in imagination: fresh bread, real wine, iron coins clinking into palms. You hear someone say, God provides. But you also hear a darker thought behind the words, God pays. Therefore salvation begins to sound like a contract. Fog thickens. Scouts return with contradictory mouths. Some swear Constantinople's walls are impossible, triple layers that laugh at ladders. Others insist the city is ready to crack from inside, that factions sharpen knives for each other, that the people hate their rulers. You don't know which is true. Therefore you pack as if both are. You feel logistics grind your bones. Rations rot in sacks that sweat mold. Bowstrings stay wet, and wet strings lie. Horses stumble on slick decks and break legs with screams that curdle the air. Men desert at night, slipping over the side into darkness or stealing away in ports, because a holy vow cannot chain a starving body. You see Venetians guarding their own interests like sacred relics, hands always near purses, eyes always measuring. Therefore you begin to understand the crusade has two commanders, the cross and the coin. The sea carries you toward the greatest city you ever hear named. Imagine the first sight of Constantinople. You see domes catching light like molten metal. You see walls stacked upon walls, stone teeth running along the shore. You hear your comrades swear, some in awe, some in greed, some in fear. The city looks like it belongs to another world, too rich to be mortal. But the ships keep gliding forward. Therefore wonder turns into appetite. You feel the oar's rhythm under your feet through the hull, a heartbeat you do not control. You smell pitch, sweat, and the sour breath of men who live too close together. You hear prayers spoken fast, as if speed makes them stronger. But you also hear jokes about loot, and the jokes land too easily. Therefore the line between pilgrim and predator blurs. The first contact hits like a slap. You see defenders on the walls, Greek fire crews, archers, men in armor that glints. You feel arrows hiss past. A ship shudders as something slams into wood. You taste panic, sharp as vinegar. But the Venetian crews do not flinch. They steer like they steer through storms. Therefore your fear rides on their confidence. You see ladders raised against stone. You climb again, because climbing becomes your entire life now. You feel your shoulders burn. You hear the thump of your own breath inside your helmet. You reach for a handhold. But the wall spits you back, stones drop, poles shove, hot liquid splashes and screams erupt where it lands. Therefore the city teaches you that faith does not make stone soft. Yet pressure finds cracks. You hear shouting inside the city, factions yelling, bells ringing, orders colliding. You see smoke rise where it should not. You don't know if it means revolt or a trick. Therefore every rumor becomes a weapon. The prince's promise pushes the host forward. You see banners snap. You hear commanders barking commands that drown out doubt. But the money still does not arrive. Only more promises, more speeches, more religious language wrapped around political hunger. Therefore patience decays. AD 1203 turns toward AD 1204. You feel time not as calendars, but as fraying rope. Inside Constantinople, the people hate the Latin newcomers. Outside the walls, your camp rots under rain and resentment. Every day the ledger stays unpaid. Discipline loosens like a knot in wet cord. You see fights break out over bread. You hear accusations. Venetians blame Crusaders. Crusaders blame Greeks. Everyone blames God in the privacy of clenched teeth. Therefore the crusade starts to eat itself. You watch the prince, now an emperor placed on a throne by foreign swords, walk like a man wearing borrowed clothing. You see fear in his eyes when crowds jeer. He promises payment again. But promises do not fill wagons. Therefore your camp begins to speak a new prayer. Take what is owed. The first great assault arrives not as a plan, but as an explosion of necessity. You see ships shove towards seawalls until timbers groan. You feel the deck jump under you. You smell smoke as fire arrows find tarred wood. Your throat tightens. You cough. You climb a ladder while sparks fall like angry insects. But there is no retreat that does not become starvation. Therefore you climb through smoke as if climbing through judgment. You see men hauling a gangplank, trying to drop it onto battlements. The plank wobbles. The sea slaps below. You feel the height in your knees. A man ahead loses footing and vanishes, a brief scream cut off by water. You don't know if his armor drags him down or if he swims. Therefore you step anyway, because hesitation becomes death. Fire breaks out. You see it leap from roof to roof inside the city, faster than orders, faster than mercy. The wind carries embers that land on cloth and hair. You smell burning oil, burning wood, burning everything that makes a home. You hear civilians screaming in streets you cannot see. But the assault continues because a burning city looks like a surrendering city. Therefore flames become strategy. The political ground shifts beneath your boots. You hear that the city turns its own emperor into a prisoner. You hear that the prince you lift up becomes a liability, a symbol of humiliation. You see messengers running, faces gray. You don't know which faction holds which gate today. Therefore, every rumor becomes permission. Your alliance collapses into a simple equation: hungry men outside, terrified men inside, and a wall that stands between them. Therefore, the wall must fall before your army falls apart. Priests argue. Knights argue. Venetians count. But debate does not stop hunger. Therefore, action wins by default. Imagine April AD 1204. You stand on a ship so close to the wall that you smell stone dust and human breath drifting down from above. You hear waves slap the hull like impatient hands. You feel your sword's weight pulling at your belt, not heavy in metal, but heavy in consequence. A gangplank lifts. Men grunt. The plank drops. For a heartbeat you hover over water and death. One step and you drown. One step and you become part of a story that never forgives. Therefore your boot lands on the plank. You sprint. The plank flexes. You feel it shiver under your weight. You see arrows streak past like dark needles. A shield in front of you jolts as a bolt hits, and the man holding it stumbles, but stays upright by stubbornness alone. You taste salt and smoke. The far end of the plank slams against stone. Therefore the wall is no longer distant. It is within reach. You leap. You land on the battlements with strangers at your shoulder. You don't know their names. You don't know if they live in the next minute. Therefore, they become brothers by necessity. You see a defender rush you, eyes wild. You raise your shield. The clash numbs your arm. You feel the sword in your hand, the grip slick. You thrust. The man falls back into a gap between stones. You don't watch him land, because another rush comes. Therefore, the fight becomes a tunnel of immediate choices. A doorway yawns open. You see darkness inside. You hear footsteps. You don't know if it hides surrender or an ambush. Therefore, you slam forward, shoulder first, because control is the only mercy you can still afford. Inside, the air is stale and thick with fear. You see a corridor, a stair, a flash of movement. You swing at a shadow. Steel rings. Someone cries out in a language you do not understand. But pain needs no translation. Therefore, the city begins to open like a wound. You spill down into streets. You feel cobbles under your boots, slick with something that is not rain. You see civilians running, women pulling children, old men clutching bundles, monks clutching icons as if wood can stop iron. You hear church bells ringing wildly, not in celebration, but in alarm. But the bell sound mixes with your side's roar, and the roar grows. Therefore, panic becomes a tide. You smell wax and incense pouring from open churches. You see golden light inside, candles, mosaics, treasures that look like heaven turned into metal. You feel your mouth go dry. You hear someone behind you laugh, a harsh sound that does not belong in a holy city. Therefore, sanctuaries become targets. You push into a church because others push you. You see an altar draped in cloth that gleams. You see icons ripped from walls, saints' faces cracking as they hit the floor. You feel your fingers touch gold and recoil because it feels warm, as if it carries body heat. You hear a priest cry out, palms open, begging in a language that sounds like a hymn. But a soldier beside you shoves him aside. Therefore, the line between relic and loot vanishes. You see a family pressed into a corner, eyes wide, trembling so hard their teeth click. You feel something twist inside, shame, pity, fatigue, so tangled you cannot name it. But you also feel the crowd behind you, pushing, grabbing, fighting over scraps. Therefore, compassion becomes dangerous because it slows you down. Outside, the city breaks into pockets of violence. You see smoke columns rise. You hear crackling fire, collapsing beams, screams that cut short. You smell burning parchment, books turning into ash. You taste it on your tongue, but your side celebrates like victory tastes sweet. Therefore, triumph sounds like a civilization being peeled open, page by page. You pass a street where someone drags a carved panel as if it is a sack of grain. You see a knight holding a jeweled cup like a trophy, his gauntlets leaving smears on gems. You hear arguments over who owns what, shouting, fists, threats. But these men share a cross on their chest. Therefore, you learn that symbols do not prevent theft, they only decorate it. You reach a square where the ground is littered with broken wood and torn fabric. You see bodies you cannot count without your mind refusing. You feel your stomach heave. You bend, but nothing comes up. Hunger keeps even sickness empty. You hear someone pray quickly, like paying a small coin to buy silence from God. But the prayer ends and the looting continues. Therefore, piety becomes a brief mask worn between crimes. You see Venetian officials now moving with purpose, not frenzy, marking, claiming, organizing. You feel the chill of efficiency. This is not only chaos, it is acquisition. But the crusade is supposed to point toward Jerusalem. Therefore, the compass snaps and points toward profit. The dust settles, not gently but as a slow suffocation. You walk past altars broken like tables after a feast. You see terrified faces behind smashed doors. You smell wax, smoke, sweat, and something worse, certainty that a line is crossed that cannot be uncrossed. You hear laughter from one alley and sobbing from another. But both sounds belong to the same day. Therefore, victory feels like sickness. You hear talk of a new order, a new empire carved from betrayal. The Latin Empire. The words sound grand, but you see the truth in the faces. This regime balances on resentment, and resentment is a blade that never dulls. Relics become loot. Vows become receipts. But receipts do not absolve. Therefore, the crusade becomes a kingdom built on a stolen altar. The verdict arrives not in a proclamation, but in the quiet after the shouting. You stand in a ruined street, and you feel the cost settle into your bones. Trust shatters between Christian worlds, and the crack runs deep, deeper than any sword cut. You see how quickly a holy mission turns into a hostile occupation when debt controls the route. But the greatest city in Christendom lies open like butchered meat. Therefore, the prize becomes a poison that stains every hand that touches it. The mirror rises now, sharp and modern. You see the pattern with brutal clarity. Institutions do not always fall because enemies breach the walls. They fall because insiders make temporary deals, because money deadlines replace shared legitimacy, because contracts become the only faith left. You feel how easy it is to justify one compromise, just one detour, just one job, just one exception, when hunger and pressure squeeze. But each exception writes a new rule. Therefore, alliances rot from the inside before they collapse from the outside. The legacy question remains, and it refuses an easy answer. Imagine your own vow, your own belief, your own promise, standing in front of a debt you cannot pay. You see the plank drop. You feel the crowd pushing. You don't know if stepping forward saves your future or destroys your soul. But the step still demands a choice. Therefore, ask this, and sit with it in silence. When survival offers a bargain that betrays your deepest oath, what price feels reasonable, and what price turns you into the very thing you claim to fight?